Now, my next guest is one of Britain's top firefighters, but that wasn't always the case for Sabrina Cohen-Hatton, who at the age of 15 was homeless. However, after a lot of hard work and determination, she became a firefighter at the age of 18 and is now the Deputy Assistant Commissioner for the London Fire Brigade. She's written a book to tell her story, and she joins me now. It's an absolute delight to meet you, I have to say, for so many reasons. And reading through your story, Sabrina, just tell us, I mean, I want to start at the very beginning to show just how far you've come, because you really are an inspiration. So your dad died when you were very young.
Yep.
There's you and your brother and your mum, and your mum had certain issues, and then you left home. Tell us about the couple of years, really, when you were homeless.
It's really difficult, and my mum suffered terribly after my father died, and I think that it's fair to say that when someone goes to war with their demons, it's everyone around them that gets hit by shrapnel, and that was certainly the case for our family. We're not alone in that. That happens to a lot of people, but for us, it was pretty disastrous, and I ended up sleeping rough when I was 15 years old, and I had some really difficult years, and I talk a little bit about it in the book, and in particular, some of the vulnerabilities that I faced being a young girl, essentially being homeless.
Because we're not talking about a week or so here, are we? No. This was a couple of years?
Yeah, this was about 2 years on and off, something like that.
And you kept going to school?
Kept going to school, sat my GCSEs, because in a funny way, it was all I could control in the chaos. But what was really clear to me at that age is there was very little help that was available to me. So I very quickly realised that the only person that was going to get me out of that situation was myself. So I started selling The Big Issue, and I couldn't make enough money to make any kind of a meaningful difference in Newport, where there were lots of other people doing the same. So I used to get on a bus at 6 o'clock in the morning up to a little town called Monmouth, and I'd sit there 7 o'clock in the morning till about 7 o'clock at night until I'd sold all my magazines, and eventually earned enough to put down a very small deposit on a rented flat in the South Wales Valleys, and I moved up and away from that life.
Well, I mean, this is what I have difficulty seeing and understanding how a young girl, and it's fantastic, I say this in a tone of admiration, is that you were living in a derelict building. Once you woke up and someone was urinating on you, and then you were attacked, and all sorts of different things that happened to you. To have that courage, where did you find that courage?
I think everyone's got a spark inside them. It just depends what you find to fuel the fire. And for me, when I was living that way, I could see people all around me that would go straight downhill or would never survive. Not very many people living that life live to old age. And from my perspective, I wanted to be able to do something to help other people when they are feeling vulnerable or having their worst possible day. And that's what actually attracted me to the fire service, because I knew what it felt like to be having that worst day of your life. And although the context is different, the sentiment is exactly the same.
So you went to a little town called Risca.
I did.
And joined the fire service. And tell me how that developed. Was there sexism there back then?
So I think it would be fair to say most women who joined in the era that I joined in faced sexism. Not in one particular location, in a variety. And I think I'd be doing women a disservice if I pretended it didn't happen. But I think what I would say is I've had far more good experiences in the fire service than negative experiences. And it's not limited to the fire service either. I have worked with people who I consider to be like big brothers to myself, and I've had an amazing career and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. But the great thing about the fire service is it took what on paper didn't seem like a particularly great prospect. I mean, I was a kid that was homeless with a couple of GCSEs, but they took me on the strength of who they believed I could be, and that's something that's really special.
It's like family, isn't it?
Absolutely, it absolutely is.
I think anyone who works in the services feels that.
Absolutely.
So tell us about the career then, because now you are Deputy Assistant Commissioner in the London Fire Brigade, but you stayed in the South Wales Fire Brigade for a while.
I did, yeah. I had one incident in South Wales that completely changed everything for me. My husband and I, before we were married, were both firefighters together on neighbouring stations, and one day I was called to an incident where a firefighter had been severely burned, and he was on that truck, so there was a 1 in 4 chance it was him. And I can remember going to that incident feeling quite sure that someone that I loved was severely injured, and I found it incredibly difficult to deal with. I was absolutely torn between that role of a loved one and the role of a responder. Anyway, we turned up, and it happened not to be him, although he had very nearly been killed himself. It was our friend that was injured. So as much as I felt this sense of relief, I then felt incredibly guilty for such a long time, and I found it so difficult to deal with. I felt like a horrible person for feeling relieved. But I had to try to do something positive with that because it was consuming me for a while. I couldn't speak about it for several years, to be honest with you. So I started looking at what causes firefighter injuries, and I was surprised to find that the majority of the time it's human error. And that's when I started looking at what we could do to reduce human error.
So you have gone on from a girl who did her GCSEs while homeless to now having a PhD.
Yes.
And you're now an honorary fellow at Cardiff University in Cardiff, and it's just fantastic, your story. I mean, I literally could sit here all morning and talk to you, but how important do you think it is for those young people who are feeling vulnerable that they have role models, because you are a role model?
I think it's so important. I mean, you know, we look at those people around us and we look at the messages that we hear every day, whether it's in the media or the people around us, and that becomes our internalised voice. And one of the reasons I spoke about homelessness, because I was terrified of doing this, by the way. I've spent so many years hiding it and pretending it didn't happen. Yeah, it was the most difficult thing. But there are thousands of people who are in the same position today as I was back then, and I wanted to be able to say to those people, look, your circumstances do not define you. They don't determine where you end up, only where you start from. And if I can land that message with one person who is in the same place that I was, it will have been worth all the angst and the anxiety around it.
Would you like to see this story on the big screen?
Well, it's funny you should say that. It's actually been picked up by Kudos, who made Broadchurch and Grantchester.
Wow.
Yeah, so we're in early development at the moment, but we might see it on the screen.
I couldn't wish you more success in everything, and obviously your continued job as our Deputy Assistant Commissioner for the London Fire Brigade. Delight to meet you. Thank you so much, Sabrina.
Pleasure.
Thank you.